Hello brothers and welcome to Sigma Old Man channel. The eyes don't lie. When someone stares too long, it's never just by accident. Psychologists say that the average human eye fixates on a stranger for less than 3 seconds before shifting away. But when a Sigma male walks into the room, those 3 seconds stretch into something uncomfortable, like time itself refuses to let him pass unnoticed. It's not about looks, status, or some overplayed idea of confidence. It's something far stranger, something that makes people tilt their heads, squint a little, and wonder, what's his deal? And the truth is, people don't even know why they're staring half the time. They just can't look away. Maybe it's the silence that feels louder than noise. Or maybe it's that weird suspicion that he knows something about you that you don't want him to. And if you've ever been caught staring at a Sigma yourself, don't worry, you're not broken. You're just human. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the 12 brutally honest, non-cliché reasons why people can't stop staring at Sigma males. Number 1, they don't shrink in confrontation, they expand. When most people are confronted or challenged, they react in predictable ways. Some flare up instantly, raising their voices, puffing up their chests, and overcompensating with aggression. Others shrink back, avoid eye contact, and do whatever they can to escape the moment. Both reactions are easy to read, and because they're predictable, they don't command much attention. But with a Sigma male, confrontation plays out very differently. He doesn't explode and he doesn't retreat, he expands. What that means is that the more pressure applied to him, the calmer he becomes. His body language doesn't tighten, it loosens. His breathing slows down, his words become sharper, not louder. It's the exact opposite of what people expect. And that reversal instantly draws eyes to him. It's unnerving because it feels like he's not fighting against the energy of the room, but absorbing it and turning it back outward with even more force. That type of response makes people freeze for a second because it disrupts the entire rhythm of a confrontation. The real intrigue is that this isn't an act. He doesn't prepare a script or put on a show of control. He simply doesn't view confrontation as something to be feared or dramatized. To him, it's just another human interaction. One that can be handled more effectively by slowing things down instead of speeding them up. And because he sees it differently, his response carries a weight that others don't. While most are spilling energy everywhere, he's conserving his, making every word and every gesture count. This expansion in the face of tension also exposes people. When someone is trying to rattle him, they expect a big reaction, an outburst, an argument, some sign of weakness. But when none of that comes, when he becomes even steadier than before, it throws their own insecurity right back at them. Suddenly the spotlight flips and the one trying to dominate ends up looking unsettled while the Sigma appears untouchable. That quiet reversal is why people can't stop staring. It's not drama, it's not theatrics, it's the raw, unfiltered ability to stay centered when everyone else is losing balance. And in a world where most are ruled by impulses, seeing someone expand instead of collapse under confrontation feels rare. Almost unnatural. That's why all eyes end up locked on him, because control that deep is impossible to ignore. Number 2, they refuse the smile economy. Most people don't realize how much they participate in what could be called the smile economy. It's the unspoken system where you trade little grins for smoother social interactions. You smile at the cashier so they treat you nicer. You smile at your boss so you seem agreeable. You smile at strangers so you don't come across as threatening. It's the currency of everyday life, and most people spend it without even thinking. Sigma males don't play that game. They don't flash polite smiles just to make others feel comfortable or to soften their own presence. Instead, they remain neutral, raw, unfiltered, and unsmiling. Not because they're angry, cold, or antisocial, but because they refuse to perform emotions they aren't genuinely feeling. And in a world trained to expect constant, automatic friendliness, that neutrality sticks out like a sharp edge. When someone doesn't grin on cue, people notice. They stare longer, partly because they're trying to decode the lack of expression. Why isn't he smiling? Is he upset? Is he arrogant? Is he judging me? The human brain is wired to look for facial cues, so when those cues aren't given, it leaves people unsettled, and they can't help but keep their eyes on him. This refusal to participate in the smile economy isn't about rebellion for its own sake. It's about authenticity. Sigma males don't see the point in burning energy on fake pleasantries. They don't believe their value should come from manufactured warmth or surface-level charm. And while some may misinterpret that as coldness, it's actually a powerful form of honesty. It's saying, I don't need to put on a mask for you. What you see is what you get. That rejection of performative friendliness also creates a kind of silent authority. When everyone else is grinning just to stay socially acceptable, the one person who doesn't suddenly appears stronger, more self-assured, and even a little intimidating. People instinctively equate restraint with power, and the Sigma's unwillingness to smile for the sake of smoothing over tension gives him a magnetic presence that pulls eyes in. The irony is, his lack of a smile often communicates more than a fake one ever could. It signals that he isn't for sale, that his attention and approval have to be earned, not bought with empty gestures. And that's exactly why people keep staring, because in a sea of masks, he's the rare face that refuses to play along. Number 3, they move as if surveillance doesn't exist. Most people live with an invisible audience in their heads. Even when no one's around, they act as if they're being watched, judged, or rated. That's why people straighten up when a boss walks by, soften their tone when strangers approach, or tweak their behavior when cameras are in sight. Society trains us to constantly adjust, to always be on display, even if it's just for imaginary eyes. A Sigma male doesn't bend to that invisible pressure. He moves through the world as if surveillance simply doesn't exist. He doesn't polish his walk when someone attractive passes. He doesn't switch into customer service mode when dealing with people he'll never see again. His actions stay consistent whether the room is empty or full. That unfiltered way of existing makes him stand out instantly because he isn't performing for an audience that everyone else is subconsciously catering to. What makes this magnetic is that it feels alien. People are used to tiny signals of self-awareness in others, the nervous laugh, the polite nod, the exaggerated gestures that say, I know I'm being seen. When none of that appears, when a man acts exactly the same, whether eyes are on him or not, it's disorienting. It makes others think he's playing by a completely different code, one they can't quite access. That's why they stare, because they're trying to figure out how someone can live so unaffected by the gaze of others. This isn't arrogance, it's not the performance of not caring. It's a genuine detachment from the approval loop that most people are stuck in. For the Sigma, the idea of tailoring himself to please spectators feels absurd. Why waste energy being a watered-down version of yourself just because someone might be looking? That mindset frees him to act with a rawness that others can't imitate without slipping. And here's the kicker, the less he adjusts for others, the more visible he becomes. In a society addicted to impression management, his refusal to self-edit makes him magnetic. People watch because he represents something they've secretly wanted. The ability to live without censoring themselves. He doesn't just ignore the spotlight, he lives like the spotlight isn't even real. That's why all eyes lock on him, even when he isn't asking for it. Number 4, they trigger hidden comparisons. What makes Sigma males so hypnotic isn't always what they do, but what they make other people feel about themselves. Without saying a word, their presence has a way of lighting up a hidden scoreboard in people's minds. Suddenly, someone finds themselves comparing, measuring their own choices, confidence and freedom against the Sigmas. It's not deliberate, it's not even conscious most of the time, but the thought creeps in. Why can't I be like that? This is where the stare comes in. People keep looking because they're not just seeing the Sigma. They're seeing a reflection of everything they wish they had the courage to be. He doesn't need to flaunt money, brag about achievements, or chase attention. Just existing as himself becomes a silent challenge, a living reminder that another way of being is possible. And that quiet confrontation makes it hard for people to look away. The unsettling part is that this comparison doesn't always feel inspiring, it often feels uncomfortable. The Sigma exposes without trying how much of people's lives are built around compromise, conformity, and pleasing others. He becomes the living what if that hovers in their head. What if I stop pretending? What if I stop chasing validation? What if I stop bending myself into something smaller just to fit in? That inner questioning is both magnetic and irritating, which is exactly why people stare longer than they mean to. Even those who dislike him, who dismiss him as aloof or difficult, can't help but measure themselves against him. Envy mixes with curiosity, admiration collides with resentment, and all of that plays out silently through stolen glances. The Sigma doesn't ask for attention, but his refusal to conform quietly forces others to evaluate their own lives. That's the paradox. He doesn't trigger comparison by showing off, but by not showing off. He doesn't chase the spotlight, yet he becomes the standard people unconsciously hold themselves against. And in a world where so many people struggle with identity and authenticity, that kind of silent mirror is impossible to ignore. People stare because they're not just watching him, they're confronting themselves. And that inner tug-of-war is stronger than any performance, charm, or staged charisma. It's the raw power of being unapologetically yourself in a society built on masks. Number 5, they walk like they're not looking for permission. The first thing people notice about a Sigma male often isn't his face, his clothes, or even his silence. It's the way he walks. There's something in the movement that makes people stop and pay attention. Most people, without realizing it, walk as though they're asking the world for permission. Their shoulders shrink a little, their steps soften, their posture bends ever so slightly inward. It's the body's way of saying, I'm here, but I don't want to disturb anyone, don't mind me. Sigma males don't walk like that. Their body language doesn't broadcast an apology or a plea for approval. Their stride is deliberate, steady, grounded, and unapologetic. It's not an exaggerated swagger or some forced display of dominance. It's subtler and more unnerving than that. They move as if the space they're in already recognizes them, as if they don't need to justify their presence. The ground beneath their feet doesn't own them, and they don't own it either. They simply coexist with it, on equal terms. That refusal to shrink makes people notice. In a world where most are unconsciously folding themselves up to appear less threatening or more agreeable, someone who refuses to edit their presence stands out like a bold underline in a sea of faint scribbles. The Sigma's walk carries a quiet defiance that says, I'm not here to please and I'm not here to beg, I'm just here. And that kind of authenticity is so rare, people can't help but keep their eyes on it. What really hooks attention is that this walk doesn't come from arrogance, it comes from indifference to the approval of others. There's no invisible audience he's trying to impress. No silent committee in his head grading every step. That absence of performance makes his movement raw, natural, and oddly magnetic. People aren't used to seeing someone carry themselves without hidden strings pulling in every direction. And here's the part that unsettles people. His walk doesn't bend to context. Whether he's in a crowded room, a tense meeting, or just crossing the street, he moves the same way. That consistency makes him feel untouchable, as though the environment can't dictate his rhythm. And when people see someone walking through life without looking for permission, they stare. Not because he demands attention, but because he's proof that you can exist without asking for it. Number 6, their energy doesn't match the room. Every room has a rhythm. In high-energy spaces, people talk louder, move faster, and mirror each other's buzz. In quiet spaces, everyone tones themselves down, matching the calm to avoid standing out. Most people instinctively sync to this collective atmosphere. It's how social harmony works. But Sigma males break that pattern. Their energy never quite lines up with the room they're in, and that mismatch makes them impossible to ignore. If the room is chaotic, full of noise and rushing bodies, a Sigma will move at his own pace, unbothered, almost as if he's untouchable by the frenzy around him. While others scramble, he remains composed, refusing to let the environment dictate his flow. The contrast is striking. People notice because it looks like he's walking through an entirely different reality, one where urgency doesn't exist. On the flip side, if the room is calm, full of whispers and restraint, his presence often feels heavier than the atmosphere allows. He brings a weight with him, a quiet intensity that doesn't dilute itself to match the setting. He doesn't soften his edges just because everyone else has decided to. That subtle tension, the sense that he's running on his own frequency, pulls eyes toward him, the way a glitch on a screen demands attention even when everything else seems normal. What unsettles people is that they can't figure out if it's deliberate. Is he trying to stand out? Is it a strategy? The truth is, it's neither. A Sigma's energy is self-contained. It comes from an internal compass that doesn't take cues from external noise. He's not resisting the room and he's not trying to dominate it. He's simply refusing to be absorbed by it. That independence makes him magnetic because it reveals how much of everyone else's behavior is shaped by invisible pressure to conform. When people stare, it's not always admiration. Sometimes it's confusion, sometimes envy, and sometimes irritation. But either way, they can't look away. Because deep down, most people know how exhausting it is to constantly bend to whatever energy fills the room. Seeing someone stand in total refusal of that system is both disorienting and fascinating. The sigma becomes the glitch in the simulation, the one element that reminds everyone the system isn't as airtight as they thought. Number 7, they look straight through people. Most people use eye contact like a social handshake, just long enough to show politeness. Then they break it before things get uncomfortable. It's shallow, safe, and designed to keep interactions smooth. But a sigma's gaze doesn't work that way. When he looks at someone, it doesn't feel like he's just meeting their eyes. It feels like he's scanning straight through them. That stare doesn't linger out of rudeness or arrogance. It lingers because he's not interested in the mask someone is presenting. He's tuned into something deeper, the micro-expressions, the hesitation behind a word, the subtle flicker of discomfort. It feels less like he's listening and more like he's dissecting, breaking apart the layers people try to hide behind. And that unnerving precision makes people hyper-aware of themselves in his presence. It's not the same as intimidation, though it often feels that way. Intimidation is about dominance, forcing someone to feel smaller. A sigma's stare works differently. It exposes. It makes people wonder, what did he just see? Did he catch something I didn't mean to show? That uncertainty rattles them because most are used to slipping through conversations unnoticed, hiding their real intentions behind charm, politeness, or fake enthusiasm. With him, none of that camouflage feels safe. What hooks people is the silence in his eyes. He doesn't fill the space with exaggerated nods or overplayed reactions. He just watches, absorbing more than he gives away. And because the brain craves feedback, little signs of approval or agreement, the absence of it makes people stare longer, trying to decode what he's thinking. The longer they look, the more unsettled they feel, like standing in front of a mirror that refuses to flatter. That's why even quick interactions leave an impression. A sigma doesn't just look at you, he makes you feel like you've been seen in ways you didn't consent to. For some, that feels threatening. For others, it feels strangely magnetic, almost addictive. Either way, people walk away, remembering his eyes long after the words have faded. In a world where most interactions are surface-level performances, being stared through instead of looked at is rare, uncomfortable, and unforgettable. That's why people can't help but lock onto a sigma's gaze, even when they secretly wish they could look away. Number 8, they carry an aura of unreachable freedom. There's a certain kind of freedom most people only fantasize about, the kind where you're not chained by what others think, not dragged into the endless grind of status games, and not begging for approval at every turn. A sigma male doesn't just dream of that freedom, he lives it. And that's what people sense when they're around him. It's not just confidence, not just independence, it's an aura that says, I'm not owned by anything you're owned by. That's why people stare. In a world where so many feel trapped in invisible cages, jobs they hate, friendships they maintain out of obligation, relationships they're too scared to leave, seeing someone who walks through life without those chains is unsettling. He isn't weighed down by the shoulds and musts that most people build their entire identity around. That refusal to be caged makes him magnetic, but also frustratingly out of reach. It's not that he doesn't care about people or about the world. It's that he refuses to let society's scripts dictate his moves. He won't pretend to like someone for networking points. He won't play along with shallow hierarchies just to climb a meaningless ladder. He won't chase approval like a paycheck. And because of that, his freedom has a purity that feels unreachable to most. The frustration comes from the silent comparison he sparks. People can't help but think, if he can live that way, why can't I? The answer is uncomfortable because it forces them to admit how much of their own life is shaped by fear, fear of rejection, fear of being alone, fear of being judged. A sigma doesn't carry that weight, and that lack of fear makes him seem almost untouchable, like he's operating outside of the human rule book. This aura of freedom doesn't need to be loud. He doesn't have to shout about it or prove it with reckless choices. It's felt in small things. How he doesn't rush to fit in, how he doesn't compete in shallow games, how he simply exists on his own terms without apology. That's the part that makes people stop and stare. Because deep down, everyone recognizes that kind of freedom, but very few have the courage to live it. So when people look at a sigma, what they're really seeing is possibility, a version of life that isn't shackled by invisible chains, and that possibility is both magnetic to watch and maddening to realize they might never touch. Number 9, their minimalism feels intimidating. Minimalism is often mistaken for simplicity, but in the hands of a Sigma male it feels like precision. He doesn't dress to impress, doesn't crowd himself with accessories, and doesn't storm into a room demanding attention. His presence is stripped down, lean and uncluttered. And that lack of noise is exactly what makes him intimidating. Most people build themselves like a billboard. They wear flashy clothes, pile on brands, exaggerate their gestures, and use chatter as filler. It's not always intentional, it's just a way to mask insecurities and prove value in a world that constantly demands proof. But when a Sigma steps in without any of that, people suddenly feel exposed. His absence of clutter becomes a mirror, forcing others to realize how much of their identity is built on decoration rather than substance. What makes it so unnerving is the surgical sharpness of his presence. Without the distraction of noise, no fake smiles, no unnecessary movements, no loud declarations. He's harder to read, harder to predict. People instinctively feel the weight of his authenticity because there's nothing to hide behind. Every small gesture, every word he chooses to say lands with more force because it isn't drowned out by excess. The silence around him isn't emptiness, it's focus. That focus triggers something uncomfortable in others. Stripped of his own clutter, the Sigma exposes theirs. It makes people realize how much they rely on external signals to feel accepted, status markers, social validation, or surface-level charm. When standing next to someone who doesn't play that game, those layers start to feel flimsy, almost childish. That's why eyes linger on him longer than intended. Staring is a way of trying to decode what it looks like to exist without all the armor. This kind of minimalism isn't about aesthetics, and it isn't about rebellion. It's about efficiency. He doesn't waste energy on what doesn't matter, and that efficiency radiates as control. In a world addicted to clutter, someone who moves with surgical restraint looks almost alien. And that's the paradox. He doesn't seek attention, but his refusal to decorate himself makes him the sharpest object in the room. People stare, not because he's loud, but because he makes them feel loud in comparison. His stripped-down presence forces them to question what's essential and what's just noise. And once you notice that contrast, it's impossible to unsee. Number 10. They don't over-justify their space. Most people, whether they realize it or not, are constantly negotiating for space. They shift in their seats to make room, laugh a little too loudly to prove they belong in a group, or apologize for the smallest movements, as if just existing requires justification. It's a subtle dance of trying to prove you deserve the ground you're standing on. Sigma males don't participate in that dance. They don't shrink to take up less room, and they don't inflate themselves with fake bravado either. They stand exactly where they want, take up the space they need, and do it without an ounce of explanation. That quiet refusal to over-justify their presence is what makes people notice them. It's not aggressive, not rude, not attention-seeking. It's simply unapologetic. This subtle defiance carries more weight than loud dominance ever could. Dominant personalities often announce themselves with noise, hand gestures, and over-the-top confidence. A Sigma does the opposite. He doesn't beg for approval or signal that he's harmless. He just exists fully in his skin, and that absence of apology commands attention in a way words never could. What makes it especially magnetic is how rare it is. Most people are trained to shrink themselves, especially in unfamiliar settings, because they fear rejection, judgment, or confrontation. So when someone occupies space without hesitation, it feels almost rebellious. It challenges an unspoken social rule. You must prove you belong here. The Sigma silently rejects that rule, and the rejection itself makes others hyper-aware of him. It also creates a quiet tension. People who over-justify themselves often feel exposed in his presence. They become more aware of how often they say sorry unnecessarily, how often they try to earn attention, or how much they adjust their body language to seem less intrusive. Next to someone who doesn't play that game, their habits suddenly feel unnecessary, even weak. That silent contrast makes them stare longer, almost as if they're trying to figure out how he gets away with it. The truth is, the Sigma doesn't get away with it at all. He simply doesn't ask for permission in the first place. And that mindset is powerful because it makes his presence feel like a statement, even when he hasn't spoken a word. People stare not because he demands space, but because he reminds them of how rarely they've claimed their own. Number 11, they radiate controlled restraint. There's a certain kind of presence that makes people uneasy, not because it's loud, but because it's contained. Sigma males radiate this exact quality. When they walk into a room, people can sense there's more power beneath the surface than what's being shown. It's not about physical strength alone, it's the restrained mix of intelligence, intensity, and capability that feels like it's being deliberately kept under lock and key. Most people either leak their emotions everywhere or suppress them so completely that they seem numb. Sigma males operate differently. They allow just enough of their energy to show that you know it's there, but never enough to reveal the full extent of it. That balance, the visible hint of what they could unleash but don't, is what makes people stare. It's the quiet suggestion of danger, depth, or brilliance being withheld. This restraint works like gravity. People feel pulled in, waiting for something to happen, waiting for the moment he finally lets it all out. The tension between possibility and silence creates an almost magnetic suspense. He doesn't need to raise his voice, throw his weight around, or perform intelligence with big words. The fact that he doesn't use everything in his arsenal is what makes him more powerful. That control also unsettles people because it breaks the expected script of human behavior. When someone is provoked, you expect anger. When they're praised, you expect excitement. When they're challenged, you expect some kind of show of dominance. But with a Sigma, those reactions are often muted, carefully restrained, as if he's calculating whether it's even worth responding. That unpredictability draws eyes because it signals he's not being controlled by the environment. He's controlling himself. The irony is that people often project their own fears and fantasies onto him because of this restraint. They think if he wanted to, he could destroy me in an argument, or he could take over this room without saying much. That uncertainty makes them hyper-aware of his every move. Controlled restraint is not about weakness, it's the opposite. It's the confidence to know you don't have to prove your strength by spilling it everywhere. And that's what keeps people staring. The unshakable sense that they're in the presence of someone who's holding back far more than they're showing, and choosing silence when everyone else would burn their energy on noise. Number 12, they blur the line between confidence and detachment. When people look at a Sigma male, one of the first things they struggle with is figuring him out. He carries himself with a kind of ease that could easily be read as confidence, but at the same time it could just as well be total indifference. That blurry line, where no one can tell if he's self-assured or if he simply doesn't care, creates a kind of tension that keeps eyes glued to him. Most confident people show their hand. They speak louder, stand taller, and emphasize their presence in ways designed to be noticed. Detached people, on the other hand, withdraw completely, avoiding attention and drifting to the background. A Sigma doesn't sit neatly in either category. He's visible but not loud, calm but not withdrawn, engaged but not needy. The mix is confusing because it doesn't fit into the usual social patterns people know how to read. That ambiguity is magnetic. Some people look at him and think he must know his worth. That's why he doesn't need to prove anything. Others look at the exact same behavior and think he probably just doesn't care what anyone thinks. Both interpretations feel true, and that contradiction unsettles people because they can't pin him down. Humans like labels: alpha, shy, arrogant, humble, but a Sigma bends those categories until they don't apply. This blurred line also forces people to question themselves. If he's confident, then why does it look so effortless, so detached from performance? And if he's detached, then why does his presence feel so steady, so unshakable? The uncertainty keeps their attention locked, almost like their brain is running in the background trying to decode him. What makes it more intriguing is that the Sigma never clarifies. He doesn't rush to correct assumptions, nor does he give away clues to make himself easier to interpret. That silence adds to the suspense. People are left staring, projecting their own ideas onto him, while he remains unmoved either way. It's in that grey space between confidence and detachment that his magnetism thrives. Too much confidence can look arrogant, too much detachment can look careless. But when the two blur together, it creates a balance that feels rare and almost untouchable. That's why people stare. They can't decide if they're witnessing deep self-assurance or pure indifference. And the mystery is more captivating than the answer could ever be. Sigma males aren't just noticed, they're felt. They pull attention not because they demand it, but because their presence operates on a frequency most people can't reach. Every glance, every hesitation, every stare directed at them is a reaction to something deeper, their refusal to shrink, their quiet control, their unshakable independence, and the raw honesty they carry in every gesture. They move, speak, and exist in ways that challenge social norms, disrupt expectations, and force others to confront both their own insecurities and the rare freedom of being unapologetically themselves. From their unreadable gaze to their unfiltered energy, from the weight of their silent battles to the effortless way they occupy space, Sigma males exude a magnetic tension that is impossible to ignore. People stare, not because they want to, but because they can't help it. Each moment spent observing a Sigma is a mirror reflecting curiosity, envy, admiration, and even a little discomfort. An uncomfortable fascination with someone who simply refuses to perform life the way everyone else does. And that is the essence of the Sigma male. A quiet storm of restraint, authenticity, and freedom that draws attention without ever asking for it. They are living proof that true presence comes not from noise, flamboyance, or validation, but from mastering yourself, owning your space, and moving through life untethered by the expectations of others. If this breakdown gave you insight into the magnetic world of Sigma males, make sure to hit that subscribe button, like the video, and share it with anyone who needs to understand the force of presence that goes beyond the ordinary. Comment below with your thoughts. Have you ever been drawn to someone who carries this rare, untouchable energy? Let's dive into the discussion.